Okay, so how did it go with assignment 3? Assignment 2, rather. Is it okay? Not too shocking? Okay, good. Some of you had a tutorial today already? How were the questions? Good. Easy? Easy to knock them all out in an hour and a half? No. Shouldn't be easy. So assignment 3, if you haven't looked at it yet, is kind of throwing you into the deep end. Since you're starting with nothing, almost no real specification, and you have to do everything from scratch. So let's just take a quick look at it, just so you know what's involved. And today what we're going to do is basically try and do something that you could conceivably do for assignment 3. So it's very open-ended. It's about making a game. And here's what you need to do. So the assignment 3 is basically in one sentence is make a game. It's not just any game. It has to have certain components. For one thing, it should require some kind of skill. So it should require that somebody who's good at the game, who does well, is either good at math or maybe has a good memory or they can type quickly, something like that. So it should have some skill. It's not some game like Snakes and Ladders where all that happens is there's some random dice get thrown, characters do exactly what the dice say, and eventually somebody wins based on the outcome of these random things. There can be randomness, but there should also be skill. It should have some notion of lives or turns or tries, so it should end after a while. It should be finite. The game should increase in difficulty as time goes on. So the longer you play, the harder and harder it gets. Ideally, this would be to the point where the game is definitely finite. So it just gets harder and harder until eventually, anybody would eventually lose. That's not always possible with some games. If you're making a Jeopardy game, for example, and this Jeopardy champion comes on, maybe he just remembers all the answers to all the questions that you have stored. So it's not totally always possible to make sure the game ends that way, but do something to show increasing difficulty. Here's an annoying part. It should have some element of timing in it. So it could maybe limit the time it takes someone has to answer or produce a bunch of answers, that kind of thing. Or it could just do something simple as a dramatic pause. So we've sort of made a quick skeleton of a game last class, but it wasn't super compelling. And actually, you'd be surprised at how much you can add to a game just by putting pauses between things. So it's a little bit frustrating as a player when the instant you answer a question, for example, the next question just shows up. It doesn't even say, it says good, and then the next question scrolls up. It'd be nice if, you get to bask in the glory of your correct answer for 1 second and then before being presented with the next question. So something like, just like a sleep at the appropriate time. If you want to do timeouts, so some kind of input with a timeout, that's a little bit trickier. You can do this on every system, but it's different on every system. So it's different under Windows, it's different under Linux, and it's different than it is under Mac OS. So it's very hard to write a cross-platform game with a real-timed input. I recommend cheaping out if you want to do that with just something like this that presents the user with a prompt and tells them how many seconds they have to answer. So there's some sample code for this here. It takes a raw input And then if they didn't press enter in the right number of seconds, then it just says, sorry, I'm not accepting your input. But that means that it'll sit there waiting for input forever until they press enter, but if they took too long to press enter, they'll get this timeout. Anything fancier than that tends to break on one system or another, either under Windows or Linux or Mac OS. And of course, the game should do input validation and error recovery, meaning that if the user just types the wrong thing, you ask them for an integer and they enter a string, or they input something that's too long or not one of the options, then it shouldn't crash. It should either punish them for doing something wrong, if you think they're just trying to buy time by doing that, or it should just ask them to enter a valid input. And the format is simple. You make one file called game.py that has your game in it, and one file called readme.txt that has instructions on how to play your game. If you make a nice game, then the TAs will keep track of which games are their favorites, and will bundle up a bunch of the best ones, our favorite ones. So this is it's a sort of a real open-ended thing where you make your own project from scratch, deciding what you want to do. Yeah. Yeah.
So what if the game requires to put in the -q?
You shouldn't have to do -q new because you can just use from future import division in game.py. So it doesn't need that. Just Python game.py. Some games require auxiliary data, like a list of words or some other stuff. Just make sure that's included in the set of files that you submit as well. Yep.
With the previous assignments, we had to include the same code, but in .text format. Do you want us to do that as well, or is it just
I don't think you ever had to include the same code in .text format. There was some testing output. Here, you don't need to include testing output. Nobody's really interested in seeing a transcript of somebody else playing the game. Easier if they just play it themselves. Yeah. No, we've seen examples of games of programs that just run. We'll do one today, but if you even look at last class. No. So if we run Python scramble.py, it just runs immediately. So that kind of thing. You only need interactive mode if your program or if your code does not actually contain any program but just a bunch of functions, and then you want to test those functions in interactive mode. But in Scramble, for example, this is not just a bunch of functions. Yes, there's a function defined here, but then right away it actually starts executing all this code, and that's what runs. Once this is over, it'll exit, but that's probably what you want. Yeah. Okay. So spend a little bit of time, you don't have a ton, but spend some time thinking about what kind of game you want to make and what kind of resources you need for that. So, if it's a spelling game, you probably need a dictionary, figure out where you're going to get that from. Today we'll make a quiz game. For that I had to get a bunch of questions. And so, think about whether you can get the resources you need, and then get to it, basically. And the key thing is to try and use this sort of agile style of development where all the time you have something that works. It may not satisfy all the requirements, but you can just keep improving it, adding to it, so that when you finally push up against the deadline, you can submit something that definitely works, even if it doesn't fulfill all the requirements. You don't want to submit something that doesn't even run. Then it's going to be very difficult for a TA to judge how far you made it in this thing. Yeah.
Is there any problems with using fork for on different platforms?
No, Python is okay with fork, I think. I mean, Python's okay with running multiple processes, but I mean, there's a lot of dangers associated with using fork, like crashing the machine that it's running on if you put a fork in a loop. But if you think you know what you're doing, then go ahead and try. I'm not sure why you would need it though for this kind of game, these text games. Okay. All right. So today I want to basically convince you that this is a doable assignment. So many of you, especially those of you who never did a serious programming project before, might see this kind of assignment and just throw up your hands and say, I don't know where to begin. This just looks impossible. It's like climbing Mount Everest. I don't know where to start. Well, you start by putting one foot in front of the other until you get higher and higher and you get closer and closer to the peak. And for us, that means basically just always having something that works and keep adding to it, making sure it does a little bit more, looks a little bit more like what you ultimately want it to look like. And at some point you reach a peak where you actually have a game that does all the stuff you want, and you can then play around with it saying, oh, it would be nicer if it also had this feature or if it did this a little bit differently. And in the end, you can actually make a reasonably polished text-based game this way. And it doesn't take a ton of time to do, but don't be afraid to start. It's not going to be done in one. I mean, you don't just sit there, type out all your code, and then you have a working game. You have to start with something very small. So what I wanted to make is a quiz game. So a game that asks a bunch of questions, and you try and the player tries to answer them. And I would like, well, the first thing you realize is, well, those things are sort of data intensive. Unless you're going to do some kind of math quiz game where maybe the computer could make up the questions, you need some data. So I went online and I found somebody who was selling quiz game questions, pub quiz game questions. They're from Scotland, not surprisingly. Paid $20 and got this list of questions. I felt a little bit ripped off, but whatever. So first thing then is to figure out, well, okay, I got this data from this guy, all these questions. What format is this data in, and can I even use it for what I want to do? So I got this file, quiz.csv. CSV files are usually denote comma separated, meaning that it's some kind of spreadsheet-like file where commas are used to denote the different columns. And the easiest thing to do with these, they're just plain text files, is to open one and try and figure it out that way. So this is what $20 buys you. So I see here on the first line, what is the main solid ingredient of alphabet soup? Pasta, rice, potato, egg, food and drink, 1. Okay. So that's a little interesting. So it looks like there's a question, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 answers. This next thing looks like a category, and then there's this last number here at the end that's something unclear exactly what this is right now. Maybe we can figure it out as we go. But I need to be able to programmatically, so have Python pull this thing apart and figure out where the question ends and where these, what these categories, where the 4 answers begin. Maybe the categories are important, maybe not, and then there's this last other thing here. So actually opening it up in an editor doesn't tell us too much. So maybe we should...
Separate by a tab, the question and answers.
Yeah, so the CSV files, CSV stands for comma separated, but it's a misnomer because often the separator is something different. And we'll have a better idea if we just open this thing up in Python. So let's say lines equals open quiz.csv. So we open it, we read it, and we'll split it into lines. So now we have an array
It's
of lines, 646 lines. So that's presumably the number of questions. And if we look at the first line, it becomes a little bit more clear because when we inspect things in this Python interactive mode, we get the programmer's view of things that tells us a bit more about variables and stuff than we get with a text editor. For instance, we see here that this line is a string, it's got the quotes around it, but there's all these \t's which are tab characters. And those \t's are the things that separate the various fields, these tabs. So right after the question is a tab, then there's 4 answers, each separated by a tab, then the category, and then this last thing here. Okay. Good. So this is where the Python command line or interactive mode is nice for us because we can try and pick this apart and see how we do. So let's try, for instance, lines at 0.split on tabs. Then we get something a bit nicer. Now it's an array of strings. The tab characters are gone. The element at position 0 is the question. 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the answers. And then 5 and 6 are the category and this last number. Good. So now I think we're ready to start programming. So let's create something called, not open, but a new thing. Let's call this quizgame.py.
questions on CU Learn?
They're already in the publicly available directory, so they're already. Okay, so we're going to make this quiz game. So we've decided, well, we should open this list of questions. So we'll say something like, let's define a function called playGame. This will be where the program starts. It'll open quiz.csv. It'll read it, split it into lines. So that gives us an array of strings. And now we want our questions. And we decided that the best thing to do is to take each line and split it on tabs. So we'll say line.split on tabs for line in lines. So this is a list comprehension. So what used to be an array of strings will now become an array of arrays. We get this nicely built up array of arrays. And maybe we'll put some documentation in here just to remind us. Line at 0 is the question. Line at 1 through 4, those are the 4 possible answers. 5, that's the category. And line at 6 is some number.
Maybe difficulty level or something.
It's the correct answer.
It turns out that it's actually the difficulty level, but we'll come to that later. We'll use that later. Okay, so now we've got this thing opened up. Let's try and do something like ask a question. So let's write a function that says ask the question, and it'll take as argument a question Q, just so we have something that works. So to ask a question, maybe we should, well, what's the first thing we should do? Yeah.
Is that a question about the text? You know how it said multiple, like, past the potato, like, it goes to the viable answers, or?
So these are multiple choice questions. So those are 4 answers you get to choose from. So this saves us a lot of trouble because we don't have to try and do things like understand what the user is typing. So it should make our lives easier. Okay, so we want to ask a question. We have the question. So what's the first thing we do? Should print the question. So where's the question itself? Yep. That's Q at 0. So we print Q at 0. That'll print the question. Now we finally have something that we can actually test. And it's called quiz. Where did I save that? Okay. So that does nothing. Why not? Yeah. Because what?
Because you didn't call play game.
Yeah. No, so there's nothing happens yet because all we did was define 2 functions. We didn't actually call any functions. So this is the sort of thing that you would normally go into interactive mode and maybe test these functions. But let's just say the last thing we'll do is call play game. Okay, so it prints the question. What's the main solid ingredient of alphabet soup? Good. All right, well, if we're going to ask this question, what should we print next?
Possible.
What's that?
Possible answers.
Possible answers. So how are we going to print 4 possible answers nicely?
Maybe you could put a number or a letter beside it so if I type in something short.
Yeah, so maybe we put a number or a letter beside each one, and then it'll give the user something to choose. How do we do that? How do we do something 4 times?
Loop.
Yeah, a loop. What kind of loop?
Whatever kind you want.
Well, in this case, basically we're going to ask the questions at positions 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's pretty much the kind of thing a for loop does. An FOR loop, it's irrelevant that we're actually asking for FOUR questions. But so let's say for I in the range 1 up to but not including 5, so for I equals 1, 2, 3, 4, what we'll do is print two things. The question number, or the answer number, I, as well as the answer at position I. So let's try that. Good. So what's the main solid ingredient of alphabet soup? Is it 1 pasta, 2 rice, 3 potato, or 4 egg? All right. Now what? Yep. Well, that's a good question. So we somehow need to know the answer. So who tells us what's the answer? You mean the user has to input the answer? We have to tell the program what's the answer. But what's the answer? How do we know? Yeah.
It's the number at the end of the line.
Is that true?
We have to go through every single one.
So, how many cups of tea does the average English person drink per day? So you think that the answer is option number 2, because this is 2? So you think that it's 2 cups of tea per day?
Look at the Goomba question. You're not playing Goomba.
How many frogs does the average Frenchman eat in a year? 1? That seems too low, right? Okay, since the late 1980s, what's the newest Smarties color? Pink? Well, this is one we can check. Newest Smarties color.
Check one about translation.
Too old.
There's one about Goombas on there. If you're killing Goombas, what game are you playing?
Yeah, you must know
Mario,
that.
Doom, Sonic the Hedgehog, Quake. You're not playing Doom.
Yeah, if you're killing Goombas, you're not playing Doom, are you? No. In what country does pivo mean beer? Really? Do we have nobody? Well, do we have anybody who speaks Portuguese? No. Do we have anybody who speaks Czech? It is. In fact, if we look at all of these things, so how long is a regulation soccer game? 90 minutes. In what game might a person have a full house? Poker. So if you look at this and you find enough questions that you know the answer to, you realize the answer is always the first option. That makes it easy, right? So indeed, the main solid ingredient of alphabet soup is pasta. That's what the letters are made out of. How many cups of tea does an English person drink per day? It's 4. Same as the number of frogs that a Frenchman eats in a year. The newest Smarties color is blue. I was around when that was introduced. And the name of which island is an orange liqueur? That's sort of a trick question because it's Curacao, and it's a liqueur that's made from oranges, but it's typically blue in color. So a little bit tricky. But it's always the first one is the right answer. Okay.
So we can scramble them too.
So that'll make our lives easy because we know which answer it is, but it won't make the game much fun because, once the player figures this out, they'll always know the correct answer. But let's ignore the fun aspect for a while. That's the kind of thing that we can fix later. All right. So now, after asking the question, what should we do? Yep. Get the input from the user. So we should get the answer from the user. So maybe we should read, maybe we'll define another function, read answer. Now, this is something very specific we want here. We want an integer 1, 2, 3, or 4. So this is where we have to be careful with our error recovery stuff. So we want to do something like, say, take a raw input at some prompt, let's say, save that answer, and if answer is not in 1, 2, 3, 4, in fact, we should, while the answer is not in 1, 2, 3, or 4, we'll ask again.
What if we type in a letter?
Well, we'll see that in a second. So we ask the question. We read the answer. And let's test it. Okay, answer 1, 2, 3, or 4. I'll say 0. Invalid input, try again. I'll say 56. No. And I'll say, how about 34.5? Then I get a blow up. And the blow up is coming because I tried to take whatever the user input and converted it to an int. We've seen already that this is not generally a safe thing to do. This causes crashes. And so we need to try and accept. If we get a value error when we read this thing, then we should do something else. Okay, so we do this in 2 levels. We try reading we write one function just for reading exactly one answer. This function either returns 1, 2, 3, or 4, or it either returns an integer. It always returns an integer, which will be 0 if we get a wrong, invalid answer, and otherwise it returns whatever the user input. And as long as the answer is not in 1, 2, 3, or 4, we try again. So let's try that. So 56, invalid input, FG, invalid input, answer must be an integer. And so if I say 3, then we get a valid input. Yep.
What if you wanted to write like a hospital answer? It wouldn't work, right?
No, you can't.
Can we set it up to say like you can either put the number or the answer?
Sure, we could do that. Maybe that's sort of an advanced feature we could add towards the end if we have time. But yes. Okay, so we're able to ask a question and get an answer. And, well, we might want to know, is the answer correct or not? Okay, so when is the answer correct? Well, if the answer equals 1, then we can say correct. Otherwise, we can say wrong. Because 1 is always the correct answer. And again, this isn't going to be fun just yet, but we always want to keep something going that works. So, pasta or rice, or potato or egg, I'll guess potato, and it says wrong. I'll guess pasta, and that's correct. Good. So we've got the 1-round game going. All right. What next? Yeah.
Make it so that the answer is not
It's still too soon for that.
Add more rounds?
More rounds. I mean, the one-shot quiz game is not so exciting where you just get asked one question. So we want some kind of a loop here that says we'll keep asking questions as long as we can, or as long as the game is continuing. So after we've loaded our questions, maybe we want to say something like the user starts with 3 lives, and we'll say while the number of lives is bigger than 0, we'll keep asking questions. Now, if the answer is correct, that's great. But if the answer is incorrect, then we want to take away a life from the user, and we should maybe tell them that they've lost a life, or remind them that there's a limited number of lives. So let's try that now.
You need to do something when we're correct, too.
What's that?
Or you need to do something when we're correct.
Depends. Are we keeping score? If we're keeping score, then we should probably give them some points if they're correct. We can do that. Let's just quickly test this.
Why would it keep going?
It'll keep going as long as they get the correct answer. So there's a couple of issues here. So let's take a correct answer. 1. It says correct, great, and it asks us another question, but it's the same question again. We'll want to fix that rather soon. Let's give an incorrect answer, 3. And it says wrong, 2 lives remaining. So indeed the number of lives is decreasing, and if we give a couple more incorrect answers, eventually we get 0 lives remaining and the game is over. Maybe it's nice at the end if we let them know that the game is over. Okay, and so if they get the answer correct, maybe we should keep a score. So a correct answer is worth how much? 2 points. So now we also have scoring happening, and I'm doing really good now. But then I made a few mistakes, and finally the game was over. I finished with a score of 40. Good. All right, so biggest problem right now is that we keep getting asked the same question over and over and over again. We don't want that, so what should we do?
When you got a random number instead of 0.
Yeah, we ask the questions at 0, but we don't want that. We would like it to be a randomly chosen question, let's say. So let's, we've seen in the random module there's something called random.choice, which chooses one random element from a list. So we'll choose a random element from our list of questions, and for that we need to import random. We should tidy up this little bit at the beginning. From future import division. Ask questions. Okay, who was the first actress to receive $1 million for a film? Elizabeth Taylor.
We haven't scrambled it yet.
Yes. Which Bond film does a white convertible Toyota 2000 GT play a high-speed role? You only live twice. Okay. Which Beatles album featured the song It's All Too Much? Yellow Submarine. Okay, we're doing really well. You guys are good at this. But then we might get a couple of wrong mistakes, and we finish with a final score of 6. Okay. All right. So a couple of things we can do now. One is, even before we get to this randomizing the questions, I'm not super happy about this, this interface. Again, it's got this thing that I answer a question, it says correct, right, it all scrolls past, and the next question pops up. So I would like a little pause here after I want this, after I ask or answer a question. So there's Python has a sleep function. I just don't remember which module it's in. Time.sleep. And it takes a time in seconds. Seconds. Okay. So we'll say time.sleep, maybe 2 seconds. And something else that I like to do is have a little bit of extra space maybe. So the text doesn't always flow into to each other. Okay, Marshall Mathers is Eminem. What did we forget to do? Import time. If we want to use something inside a module, we have to import it. Okay, Gregory Peck played Dr. Mengele in The Boys from Brazil. 1. Correct. A little pause, and then the next question. That's already better. Yeah. So Python has a whole bunch of standard libraries. They're all in the Python installation directory, wherever that happens to be on your machine. And yeah, when you installed Python, you got all of those libraries. There are some non-standard ones that you'll install yourself. We'll see Pygame is one of those. But for now, whatever's in the standard libraries we'll use. Okay. Good. So old Fred was the captain of which type of vessel? I don't even know the context to that question. Correct. Pause and this thing. And if we get it wrong, if we guess Sheryl Crow here, wrong, pause, next question with some space in between. So that's already, I think, getting cleaner than it was before. What happens if you what? Keystrokes where? During the sleep? It's a good question. I think they may get pulled in the next time we call raw input. So let's do that. Let's say 1, and while it's sleeping 2. Yeah. So if they enter some keystrokes while it's sleeping, those basically get pulled in the next time that raw input is done. It's a bit tricky to clear those. It would be nice if we could clear those so that they don't get to do anything before the next question comes up. But again, that's something you can do on any particular system, but to get a solution that does that, that works on all 3 major operating systems, ends up being difficult. So we'll live with that aspect of it. The good thing is, it can really only hurt them in a sense. It doesn't help them to do this. They may lose a turn because of this, but it won't crash the program. Yeah?
Would there be a way of allowing you to just shorten the sleep mode? If they want the next question right away, they just press the answer whichever key?
Not really. Again, you wouldn't use sleep for that. You would actually, under different systems, do different things. So under Linux, I would listen to the socket that I would use the socket command to listen on standard input, and as soon as something appeared there, jump ahead. But that works under Linux, doesn't work under Windows. Under Windows, you use MSVCRT module to do something there, and under Mac OS, it's something different yet again. So I recommend not fooling around with that. We'll have plenty of time to do fancy stuff when we do Pygame, where the whole thing is a visual game development environment. It's graphical. We do everything with the mouse. There's no problems there. Yeah. This code should already be available. If you go to the samples that we do in class, should be able to get it there. I mean, it's being uploaded as I type it now. Okay, so now let's get to this problem of asking the right, or shuffling the answers here, because someone is very quickly going to learn that 1 is always the correct answer, someone who plays this game. And so let's think about how we would want to do that. So how do we shuffle the answers? So with the shuffle function, what should we shuffle? So we could put the answers in an array and then shuffle that array. Okay. So for instance, we could do something like where did we go? So we print the question, and now we say answers equals q from 1 up to, but not including 5. And then we say answers.shuffle, or it's random.shuffle. Answers. And then we say I and answers at I minus 1. So something like that. That'll do it. There's only one problem. If we shuffle the answers, then we've somehow lost the correct answer again. We could find it again by looking to see where 1 occurs in this array, but there's a nicer way to do it. So the trick, just clean all this up. The trick is actually to ask the question specifying how we want to reorder the answers. So we'll create this thing called P. P stands for permutation. And it'll just be an array that contains the indices 0, 1, 2, and 3, but in some weird order. Okay? Or even better, it'll contain the indices 1, 2, 3, and 4, but not necessarily in that order. So instead of just Q at I, so instead of listing these things in the order 1, 2, 3, 4 as they appear in the question itself, we'll list them in the order that's specified by this permutation. Okay? So let's see what we're really going to do here. So we'll do something like Python is range 1, P is range 1 through 5. Here's P. And then we'll do something like random.shuffle P. So P then is this randomly ordered thing that contains the indices 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so now we ask the questions in the order that's specified by P. So we get this random ordering. So where are we going to make this P? Well, we'll do it before we ask the question. Okay, so let's see if that works for us. Well, the numbers just show up. They just show up as 1, 2, 3, 4. If you look at this print statement, it prints I. That's I, and then it prints the answer at position P at I minus 1. Okay, so it prints 1, 2, 3, 4, and it looks at P at 0, P at 1, P at 2, and P at 3, and outputs the questions in the possible answers in that order. Okay. All right. So, and let's just check, for instance, that on a question that we know to see if this is really working. Ask question, questions at 0p. This is the alphabet soup question. So what's the main solid ingredient of alphabet soup? Rice, potato, pasta, or egg? Indeed, that appears to be a different order than it was before. The correct answer is pasta. That would have been first. Let's test it again. Now we get a different ordering. And since we're always asking the same question, we'll keep asking it, and we keep well, sometimes we get the same ordering. There's not so many of them. Yeah, we get different orderings each time. Good, so that seems to be working. Okay, so we ask the question, we read the answer, and now we want to know if the answer is correct. So before, that was just checking if the answer is equal to 1, but now that's not quite so simple. So when is the answer correct? So we have this array P. It contains the integers 1, 2, 3, and 4 in some order. And the user has now picked some option that's either the first thing in P, the second thing in P, the third thing in P, or the fourth thing in P. And they're correct if the thing they picked is equal to 1 in P. Yep? Yeah. So that says we have to be a little bit careful here because the answer that the user picks, because people generally like to start counting at 1 and computers like to start counting at 0. So if we take their answer and subtract 1, we get something which is either 0, 1, 2, or 3. And if that corresponds to, if at that position in P, if that's 1, then it's the correct answer. So let's try that. And now things get really hard because we no longer know the correct answer. So, any football fans? You think it was Arsenal? Wrong. In which country was snooker invented? Wrong. Jack Shepard is a doctor in which TV series? Correct. We now have a score of 2 and 1 life left. In which city was the famous Marquee Music Club?
I'm gonna say New York. What is New York?
New York? Wrong. Game over. We got 2. So one other thing that's a little disappointing about this pub game, this $20 that I spent on this thing, is it was really, seems to be designed for like middle-aged men who are sitting in a pub drinking beer. So, lots of questions about things that happened in the 80s, 90s. That it doesn't make it super compelling for you guys, who many of you were not born then. Or even me, for that matter. But okay, never mind the failings of this set of questions. What else can we do with this thing? That would be nice if someone would have told us the correct answer instead of just telling us we're wrong. So let's say so we want to print the correct answer. So where's the correct answer? We can either find 1 in P, or if we want, we can be a little bit lazy and just print the correct answer as a text string, because we know where that is. Where's that? Yep. It's the second element in the question, so let's, we never actually save the question, but we can easily do that and just say Q is equal to this random choice. So we'll ask the question Q, and now the correct answer is Q at position 1, right? Because Q at 0 is the question, and then there's the 4 answers, 1, 2, 3, 4. The first one is the correct one. Did I press 2 keys there? Okay. Which subway station was a hit for the band Motorhead? So no Motorhead fans here? No? Well, let's take a random guess. Wrong. The correct answer was No Sleep Till Hammersmith. What was the name of the mascot at the 1966 Football World Cup? I'll give you a hint. It starts with a W. Willie? Correct. Which actor covered the Beatles song Blackbird? William Shatner loves to sing even though he's really bad at it, so if I had to guess, I would guess him. But it was wrong. It was Kevin Spacey. Tom Jones plays himself in which film? Bridget Jones? Wrong. Agnes Brown. Okay, so again, score of 2. So what else can we add to this thing?
More lives.
More lives. That's one option. Well, what does the assignment ask for that we maybe haven't hit at all yet? Well, the assignment asks for some element of time, and I'll cheat on it by just saying we have an element of time because we pause for 2 seconds between questions. That's maybe not fully the best we could do, but it's at least hits that. But there's something that we haven't hit. Yeah. Increasing difficulty. We don't have any difficulty increasing at all yet. And actually, the file we have lets us do that because that last field happens to be a difficulty level. So difficulty level 1, what's the main solid ingredient of alphabet soup? Yeah, I would have known the answer to that one. Here's another difficulty level 1. How many Summer Olympic Games were canceled because of World War II? How many games must you win to win a normal set in tennis? So anybody who plays tennis would know that. How long is a regulation soccer match? Anybody who watches soccer would know that. In which game are Staunton pieces used? That I don't actually know. I wouldn't have known that. But those are supposed to be the easier ones, and then the difficulties go up from there. So for example, how many eyes are there in a deck of cards? That's really not easy, because you might think the face cards, just count the number of face cards and multiply by 2, but actually some of the face cards only have one eye. So it's not obvious. How many dots in the Pac-Man game? Okay, so this tells us that there is some chance of increasing the difficulty here, but we need to somehow order our questions by difficulty. So let's figure out how difficult these questions can be. So what did we say? Questions equals open quiz.csv. We read it. We split lines, or that is lines. Questions is equal to so now we've got this big list of questions, and now we want the difficulties is equal to questions is equal to Q at what position is the difficulty? 6. 5 was the category, 6 was the difficulty. Q at 6 for Q in questions. So there's the list of all the difficulties, and we can ask for the max difficulty is 3, and the minimum difficulty is 1. So back to our program. Let's sort our questions into difficulties. So Instead of calling those questions, we'll call those raw questions. And we'll say, questions is an array of length 3. So let's say oops. So there's 3 kinds of difficulties, 1, 2, and 3, but we'll rename them 0, 1, and 2 because we like zero-based indexing. So questions at level I will be Q for Q in questions, in raw questions. If Q at 6 equals I plus 1. So that'll be our split into questions, into different difficulties. Questions at 0 is going to be the easy ones, 1 is the medium ones, and 2 is the hard ones. So how should we figure out what kind of difficulty of question to ask? What's that? Yeah, maybe take the score and, I don't know, divide it by 10. So you get 5 questions right at one level, then it goes up to the next level. We may not even get that far, but we can try. So now this questions here is actually an array of 3 things. So let's say, let's pick a difficulty. Difficulty is equal to score divided by 10. And we should be careful because if you get 15 questions right, then you'll get to a difficulty which is bigger than 3, so we should take the minimum of 2 and score divided by 10. All right. And when we ask the question, maybe we want to print a little bit more about it.
Category and difficulty.
Yeah, just so people know what's going on. So let's say category, chess, and difficulty, chess. So the category is Q at 5. The difficulty is Q at 6. All right, let's see if any of that works. Okay, category is TV and film, difficulty is 1. What's Agent Mulder's first name in the X-Files? You must have seen the X-Files, somebody. Yes. Fox Mulder. Blue Fairy is a character in which animated film? Pinocchio. Correct. Who starred as the $6 Million Man? Lee Majors. I like the answers here. Major Lee. Who sang the Bond theme song, Diamonds Are Forever? I'm going to guess Nancy Sinatra. Wrong. Never let me guess. What was Louis Armstrong's nickname? Satchmo. Okay, so, all right, score is 8 so far. What's Doctor Who's dog's name? K9. All right, score is 10, and now we're at difficulty 2. Princess Jasmine was from Aladdin. So that's difficult for a middle-aged man, but not for you guys. Who had a sweet hit song with Lollipop in the 60s? The Chordettes. Let's try the Ronettes. Wrong, it was the Chordettes. Damn. Should have let me pick. How many Rambo films have been made? These questions might be a bit old. 4? All right. 4. Brazil? Wrong, it was Hungary. Whoa, that's unusual. Okay, so we finished with a score of 14, and you saw that actually by paying attention to the difficulty there, we got something a bit more playable. We lasted more than, typically we would get like 4 rounds, get 1 right out of 4, and then game would be over. A little bit of formatting issues, so this needs a colon, maybe a little bit of extra space between asking the questions. So let's just do one more round of this. Who sang the Bond song Moonraker? Nancy Sinatra? Shirley Bassey. Who fell head over heels in love with Ann Darrow? King Kong? Correct. Who married Nicole Appleton in 2008? Which rock star? Mick Jagger's too old to marry anybody, right? But I'll guess it. It's Bono? Wrong, it was Liam Gallagher. What was the hit song for Lulu? We're not doing well in this round. Shout. Correct. In Friends, the TV show, what is Ross's profession? Paleontologist. Good. We might make it to level 2. Which famous brothers are members of the band Oasis? So the same names keep coming up again. The Gallagher brothers. Correct. Which man's music kills the Martians in the film Mars Attacks? Slim Whitman. Makes their heads explode. Who is the leader of the Quarrymen? Elvis Costello? Wrong, it was John Lennon. Yes. All right, so we finished with a score of 10. We at least got to difficulty 2, and that's a good place to leave it for today.
Can I add timing for the answer? If like the user didn't answer